think in many ways it ties very nicely with the theme of this conference, which is terminology, unifying terminology. And the problem is that if you want to call something, to give it a name, you first have to know what it is that you're calling, what it is that you're naming. And it's my observation that very often we use words, we use terminology in respect to old photographic processes without even realizing fully what it is that we are talking about, without having ever seen a print, or we try to identify prints without having ever seen one or understanding how they are made. When we were beginning the project, when we were discussing the topic, we tried to use our imagination a little bit, and this fantastic film came to my mind about the old Arabic doctor that we in Europe call Avicenna. His real name is Ibn something, I never remember it, but he is considered the founding father of medicine. And right before his death, he breaks all the sacred rules, and for the first time ever actually looks inside a human. It's on the advice or on the insistence of his student that he decides to commit this mortal sin, basically condemn his soul, and actually see what it is that he tries to cure, what it is that he tries to treat. And I think in many ways the work of collectors, the work of curators, and also from my experience from Warsaw, the work of conservators is pretty much like the work of this medieval doctor. They get a picture that they are supposed to rescue. But what is it really? I mean, when I look at conservation terminology and I hear about 2-layer prints, 3-layer prints, that means very little to me as a photographer. When I speak using photographic terminology to conservators that I work with, it appears to mean quite little to them. So we started looking into this issue, and then we realized that there is a considerable deficit of knowledge right now, and this considerable deficit of knowledge concerns all of us. Photographers, conservators, curators, all people working with photography, all people working with old photographic processes. First of all, we are dealing with highly generalized knowledge. You read a book or you look at an anthology and you see salted paper. Now, what is salted paper and what does it mean to me? Honestly, nothing. It could be one of dozens of different recipes. Some prints considered to be salted papers, when analyzed with XRF, don't even show silver. There's no silver in them. And yet we consider them salt prints for some reason. There is a dozen recipes, including different binders. You use albumen. I mean, yeah, we call it albumen print, but what's the difference between this and a salt print? It's just a binder. Why do we call albumen a special name and we don't call arrowroot paper a special name if it's also salt print plus a binder? And so on and so forth. So this very general terminology really stops us from understanding what it is that we are dealing with. Secondly, knowledge is very fragmentary, especially among us photographers. When you go to a workshop, when you talk to somebody and try to learn a process, you get one recipe, 2 maybe. You get a way that will work. I will be showing the carbon transfer process tomorrow, and that's exactly what I will be doing. I will be showing a way that works with me. Is it everything that is there to know about carbon transfer? No, it isn't. But most of my audience will be interested in getting a successful print when they come back home, not in understanding everything about the process. So again, we end up with knowledge that simplifies, that creates misconceptions. Coming back to the salt print, okay, a spoon of table salt, 2 spoons of silver nitrate, and a sheet of paper, right? Well, yes, it's gonna work. Yes, it's gonna produce a print, and yes, it's gonna be a salt print. Is it gonna be like one of those salt prints that Gintas showed? No. Probably none of them was made using this recipe, and it's in every book. Written in grams, of course, not in tablespoons. Finally, it appears that we live in 2 separate worlds. In one world, there is us, photographers, and in the other world, there's the conservators, there is the caretakers of collections, the people working in museums. I'm lucky because I'm part of 2 worlds. Because of the PhD program that I'm doing right now, I entered the world of conservation. I spent the last 15 years in the world of photography doing alternative processes. So I'm lucky to use both worlds. But at the same time, every moment I speak to people from one of those 2 worlds, I have to click a switch in my mind and change the language I'm using. Because they don't understand the other language. The photographers don't understand the language of conservation, and most certainly the conservators I work with don't understand the language of photography for some reason. And we can learn from each other, because conservators have tons of knowledge that I as a photographer need. And I as a photographer have quite a bit of knowledge that they could benefit from. That's how I got into a PhD program, saving my current supervisor in a project that she wasn't able to do herself because it turned out that she needed someone who understands about photography. If you look at written sources, modern written sources, you'll have the same story. I mean, Gintas named Bernard Lavedrine, great writer, great author, great books. I wouldn't want to produce prints from his recipes, from the descriptions of the process that he includes. I certainly would want to look after a collection using his advice, but not produce prints. You have books written about old photographs, about their identification, about care, but few of them are written by photographers and few of them are written by people who really understand those processes. One notable exception, Riley's book on salt paper and albumin print, that one actually contains some solid photographic knowledge. Everything else doesn't. But if you look at books for photographers, it's the same story. The things they tell you about image permanence, you could die laughing. The things they tell you about choice of materials that you want to make, well, fortunately, I never followed, but this is very often very, very ill-informed. So what we decided to do was making research, doing a project that would stand in both worlds, that would use the fact that I am first of all a photographer and I'm crazy about historical processes, and some time ago I made it my goal to learn all of them if possible. I don't know if I'll live long enough, but I'm trying. So we chose the most important, or definitely the most popular processes of the 19th century, which is silver-based processes, because most of 19th century photography and almost all 20th century photography was based on silver. And we decided that we are trying to recreate as close to everything as possible. So we are right now, or I am right now, because I'm heading this project, I'm right now sitting in the library day in, day out, studying those old books, working out the recipes, translating them from English measurements or American measurements into something that we can understand, and then going to the lab and testing one after another in order to make models for further research. Once we have all the recipes we can get hold of, I can't say once we have all the recipes, because obviously some of them have become lost, some of them are just not in the books I found, but once we have all the recipes we can get, and once we have tested all those recipes to make sure they actually work and they are not accidental or deliberate errors, and you wouldn't believe the amount of errors in old books, especially late 19th century, we are going to make models, and some of those you will be able to see. So we are going to make those prints under laboratory conditions so that we know exactly how each print was made. We know exactly what materials were used, what paper was used. We have all the data that we could possibly have had if we had watched the old photographer. And it's these models that we are going to use for analysis. We are going to take microscopic photographs. We are going to do XRF and FTiR analysis so that we see how each of these variants translates into instrumental data. We can't be sure, of course, this will work, but the situation now is that most of the time we get a print that we think is a salt print or an albumin print, and we do XRF. It sometimes confirms it, sometimes says it's not possible, sometimes gives results that we don't understand because we get a salt print with no silver. And we don't know for sure, it's our guesswork. This time when we get a result, we will know for sure what it is. And we hope to be able to match the results to the actual material, to the actual photograph that we are looking at. Since, of course, this will be a fantastic opportunity to do more research, we're also going to do microfading tests, that's checking light fastness, so that we hope to be able to offer recommendations for display. Because the process that was used to produce the print will obviously influence its permanence, its longevity, not just the fact it's a salt print or an albumin print, but for example, what it was toned with. We hope that we will be able to produce more detailed identification, and as a result, to offer more detailed recommendations for presentation for display. But first of all, what we are hoping for is bridging the gap, because we believe that this project is going to bring my photographic skills and my experience with producing alternative photography into the world of conservation, into the world of people working with historical objects, and at the same time that it's going to take the knowledge that's already there and bring it into the photographic world. Hoping that the resource, because we are planning to produce a compendium at the end, so we're hoping that the results of the project will prove useful to both sides and possibly start a communication for a longer future. Now, we are at the beginning. We've been working on this project for half a year now, but we've already done a few important things. Here you can see our schedule, our timetable. So actually, some more concrete results should be there next year, will most definitely be there in 2 years' time. Right now, we can only, or I can only speak about what it is that we are actually going to do. We were very fortunate to be able to already make some progress. Most importantly, we got money. Most of the time in culture, when you're talking about ambitious tasks that you want to do, you end up hearing, okay, who's gonna pay, right? Fortunately, we were lucky. The description of the project was convincing enough, so the National Center for Science in Poland gave us 50,000 euros to play with, so we can do real work. We have a very detailed schedule that I'm following. We have all the necessary equipment, or most of it. We started analyzing the historical sources. My plan is to go over quite a volume, and first tests have also started, and I will be able to show you some of the first results. Now, the equipment is a tricky thing because 19th century was the age where photographers didn't live long, right? Quite a few of them got poisoned. Quite a few of them went mad. After all, mercury does it to you. And the problem is I'm working with the Academy of Fine Arts, and like all universities, the Academy of Fine Arts doesn't have a lab, or at least doesn't have a working lab. So the whole research, the whole project is going to be done in my laboratory. A very comfortable situation. I don't have to leave home to work. We were able to buy some equipment both for protection and for temperature control because, for example, recreating 19th century silver gelatin dry plate requires perfect temperature control, stuff like that. So I have all of this installed by now. And of course, we are running into all sorts of problems already. The general plan was that the first year was the time which would show all the problems, or the most important problems that we will run into, and we have already hit two walls. The first was called water, because it turns out that what flows in our water pipes is hardly ever water. It's usually some concoction of God knows what, plus a little water. In my case, it works as a developer. Really, if I take water from my tap and put it on a wet plate collodion, it develops it. I don't need a developer for that. But of course, it wreaks havoc with the whole research. So we got all the water purification equipment in place. The second problem, much more complicated, we ran into was called paper. Because the paper that we can buy now, well, manufacturers tell you that is the same they've been producing since the 15th century. And the Red Riding Hood lives next door, right? It doesn't happen. The papers they sell now, even if they say they are identical with the old ones, are not. We tried samples of papers that we knew are sold under the same name and have been sold under the same name for dozens of years. The recipes have changed. We tried 7 papers that we were hoping would work. And some of these papers are not artists' papers, but they are conservation materials. So that's the situation where you should theoretically be able to trust the manufacturer, right? Because you are the conservator, and you get a paper that's got photographic activity test passed, that has no optical brighteners, and is supposed to be pH neutral and very stable. And then you try to run a simple salt print on it, and the paper self-exposes. It darkens after 20 minutes. You talk to a chemist, and you hear optical brighteners. And the manufacturer says there are none. So actually none of those papers, including the ones made for conservation, worked. We are right now down to 2 papers. One of them is Whatman filtering tissue, because this one is most likely pure cellulose and nothing else, hopefully, which means we need to size it, because of course it doesn't work as paper. So there's a whole world of trouble here, but at least it doesn't contaminate the prints. And you know what? All of a sudden, all those recipes that I found in notebooks that didn't work started working. All of a sudden, it now works. All of a sudden, the color they describe in a notebook is the same color I get. All of a sudden, they tell me that I can store papers, try to store sensitized salt prints for a few days, and then expose them and see what happens. You will get pictures that are fogged. You use pure cellulose, and it works all of a sudden. So we have already one important breakthrough behind us, hoping for more, and I'm sure they will come. We've also worked out a way of making barita coating on papers. Now, in the 19th century, as well as in the 20th, quite a lot of papers used for photography were barita coated. And the problem is, of course, you can get barita coated papers, but you can't get anybody to do the coating for you on the paper that you've chosen. And for the test, it has to be the same paper with every print. So we needed to work out a way to coat our own papers. It's not perfect. They are not calendared the way historical papers were, but I did fool a couple of conservators, they were historical. So I guess it works. You have a sample print that's collodion emulsion on self-coated barita paper. It works. So we already have another important breakthrough. And the next thing that we will be working on, actually the next thing I've already started working on, is paper negatives and trying to recreate all this multitude and richness of paper negatives that were used, because of course we all remember Talbot, but Talbot wasn't by any means the only one. There was Legray, there was Bayard, there were plenty others that had their own recipes. There are already some surprises. For example, negative material was very often also used for prints. They would use the same paper for print, and I was surprised how fast it actually is. Because, for example, if I take a salt print, a regular salt print, and expose it to UV light in my exposure unit, it takes about 100 seconds for it to expose properly. If I take a negative paper, it takes 100 times shorter, just a quick flash of 1 second, and I have a perfectly exposed image. And that's the first test, so I'm pretty sure we will work faster. Oh, also, for example, salt print and albumen print were developed in the past. It's very difficult to get them developed now, because with modern papers it doesn't seem to work properly. At least it fogged all my tests. The moment I used Whatman, it worked. And I have an example to show. Now, you can see a small collection of pictures that are very boring in front of me, because most of them show the same scene. Right? Oops. So I'm actually hoping to end up with a couple hundred or more pictures, all of them showing the same scene, each of them using different technique, as an illustration for different processes. There are a couple pictures, more than a couple pictures, that actually show different scenes, and this is because I haven't had time to print using the same negative yet, and I just added them into this presentation to make it slightly richer, to include more processes. These are not historical prints, so there's absolutely no need to be extra careful with them. You can smell, touch, whatever you want. They shouldn't be poisonous anymore. They all have a name of the process at the back. It's in Polish, unfortunately, but I will be happy to translate into English if anyone's interested. Yeah? So please feel free to come here, look at them. There will be different variants of the same process. There's one paper negative also for demonstration. If you have any questions about any of these processes, please ask.